All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome and to our August event at Stein Financial Group. And this is called Navigating Retirement Planning, which is a condensed version of a more in-depth course that we do a couple times a year, actually, for it's really geared towards public employees in particular. But I'll get into that in a second. But I know people need to trickle in here, as always, with logging into Zoom and remembering your password and all that good stuff. So I'll give it just a few minutes, as always. But my name is Anthony Gerbi, and I've been working for Stein Financial Group for over a decade now. Lot of experience helping people navigate retirement just in terms of the stages that you go through. So what I mean by that is you go from the stage of, well, I'm working and retirement is this thing that's way down the road, and yeah, I'm thinking about it, but not really. And then usually the next stage is, ooh, okay, I might actually want to get out of here sooner than I thought. What are the things I should really be getting in? What are the ducks I should be getting in a row? And I help with that. And this always surprises people when I say it, but there are some people who say, I'm retiring. This is the date. This is when it's going to happen. And then they come see me afterward and basically just say, well, how'd I do? And for some people, that sounds like the worst possible thing, people who are planners or things like that. But some people like to do it that way. And it's not necessarily wrong. It's just if you don't think about this stuff before you retire, you're locked in. Whatever it is, it is. I can help you learn what all your options are, but you're going to have less than if you start thinking about this ahead of when you want to retire and you've got more levers to pull in order to, oh, I should be doing this that way. I should be invested differently. I should be saving more. I should be saving differently. We'll get into all that stuff. But today we're going to go through not just the basics. I mean, we are going to hit a lot of the basics, but it's about how to think about some of this stuff. And I think that's the most important piece that I always try to communicate here is here's how I would recommend that you think about these questions. Everybody knows what the questions are, right? Everybody understands that to retire, you're going to need money to live on one way or another, right? And if you're a public employee, that's coming from a pension. If you're any employee, that's coming from Social Security. And then hopefully we've saved a little bit and we have investments as well. So everybody know, okay, well, that's my money, but how do I make it work for me? How do I turn that into a paycheck, let's say, in retirement, even though you're not working anymore? And that's what I want to go through today. So a few more people have trickled on. Again, this is a condensed sort of retirement in a box version of a course that we actually do. The course we do, actually, the next session of it is coming up in September. So if you're interested in diving deeper on any of these topics, that's a great place to turn because we're going to go deeper in that. But the idea is that for people who want to get an in-depth look at their retirement, that course we do called The Road to Retirement is a great way to go even deeper than what we're going to do today. It's going to cover some of the same info, but just in more depth, even coming September. It's a 3-week course. And by that, I mean it's 3 sessions, 1 hour sessions, but 3 weeks in a row. Some of you may have even done it before, and that's great. And things are always changing and updating. That's why we continue to offer it every year. But I wanted to kind of make sure people understood the difference. Today is sort of a all-in-one retirement in a box, and necessarily it'll be a little more condensed than like that in-depth course usually is. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. I talk about this stuff all the time, so I'm going to do my best not to go too quickly because some of this stuff, I don't want to say any of it's basic, but it's fundamental, and that means I just talk about it quite a bit. So I'm used to kind of to saying these things. So the questions or the issues that come up in navigating a retirement, right? How to create your paycheck. What money are you going to live off of? That's a simple way to put it. How are you going to live when you retire here? And secondly, what are the strategies you want to avoid so that you're not taking on extra risk as you retire? What are the things that could go wrong and how do we prevent them from going wrong? That is, I think, a big piece that people think about. And then next, what are the next pieces? And it says this word estate planning on the screen, and that's just a term that I am not a big fan of. Not because it's bad. Estate planning is very important, but I think the term is intimidating, or it maybe doesn't explain itself very well. What I mean by that is when I see estate planning, I think some people look at that and they get a little intimidated and say, well, that's for people who have estates. That's for people who have oodles and oodles of assets. And I'm just a simple retiree. Yeah, I'm doing okay, but I'm not like a multi-millionaire or 10 millionaire or whatever. That's who estate planning's for. And what I'd say is that term is what's tripping us up because estate planning is for everybody. Estate planning is simply what do you want to happen to your estate or to your assets? A, and most importantly, when you're no longer here. But B, what do you want to have happen while you are still here? Are there things you want to set up? Anybody on this call who has dealt with cleaning up an estate from maybe a parent or a friend or, excuse me, a grandparent, and it might have been a little messier than it needed to be, you know what kind of a headache that stuff can be if the person who is passing it on didn't think about it ahead of time or didn't set it up so that it was easy. So that's really what estate planning is. And of course, we're going to talk quite a bit about taxes too. So let's start at the beginning. How do we make your retirement paycheck? Now, there's going to be a lot of info on these slides that are geared towards public employees, and that would be true of local, state, even federal to an extent, because I'm going to be talking about pensions. Not everybody on this call necessarily has a pension, and that is okay. The info is still going to apply to you. Just know that obviously if you don't have a pension, then the money that we're going to talk about or that you're going to live off of needs to come from the other sources that you do have access to. So, little disclaimer there. But where are you going to get your money from when you retire? Let's break it down simply. Obviously, Social Security, and we are going to talk a little bit about Social Security and what some of the specific rules are there in a second. If you are a public employee, para, which is your pension, which you've been paying into throughout all the years you've been working, at least in the public sector, that will generate income for you when you retire. And then lastly, it's your assets. It's what you've been able to save. If you've got a deferred comp plan because you're a public employee, that's an asset that you're going to be able to tap into. If you've got a 401k because you're a private employee, same deal. But the trick is, and this will come in when we get into taxes, all of those three things I mentioned, Social Security, para, and your retirement accounts, 401k, 457, is all taxable. It's all taxed like income. And that means that we need to be very thoughtful about how we structure that income coming in. Not that there's a way to avoid the taxes or anything, but we want to do it in a way that minimizes your taxes, that spreads out the taxes so you're not hit with these surprise tax bills. I can't tell you how many times somebody retires and they do their taxes for that first year where they're retired, and they're like, "Whoa, I owed the state." If they stayed in Minnesota, I owed the state like 4 grand last year, Anthony. What is going on? And I say, did we get state withholding set up? Or on like some of the things you can't even do state withholding. So you got to pay attention to that. And they're like, "Oh no, I didn't even think about that." And I'm like, "Yep, that's a common pitfall is you don't think about the withholding on these income you don't think about the whole withholding on this income when you retire. You're mostly just concerned with getting out the door and retiring, and understandably so, but don't let that sneak up on you. So, how much income do you need? Right? And the simplest way to think about this, and everybody's different, everybody on this call is going to need a different number. And need is maybe not even the right word. How much income would you need to live the life you want to live? Right? I'm not just talking about covering your bare necessities, but the cupboards are bare and you're really living rough, right? I'm talking to live the life you want to live. Only you know how much money that's going to cost because it's your life. But I can give you a couple rules of thumb. One, and the simplest rule of thumb, is try to get to the same number that you're earning from work right now, right? If you could just keep your income exactly steady, you're already living right now. So that's probably a decent number to aim at. And like when we do retirement planning, which is something at some point I would encourage all of you to do, is sit down with us and really do a one-on-one. Okay, let's look at my cash flow. Let's look at what this is going to be. We do that. When I help people with that, that's usually the place I start is to say, okay, well, what if we just tried to get you to the same amount of income coming in the door as when you were working prior to retirement? Baseline, right? But then I tend to quote this 80% rule, and this is just a rule of thumb. This is not a hard and fast rule, or that it will apply to all of you necessarily. But if you have a pension, because this is really a rule geared towards people who have a pension, if your pension plus Social Security is getting you about 80% of the way to where you want to be every month. So whether that's the number you have in your head, hey, Anthony, I'd like to be able to spend 8 grand a month. That's what my life costs. That'll give me a little bit of breathing room for when things come up. That's the number for me. Great. If we can get 80% of the way there from your pension and Social Security, you're in a great spot because your retirement accounts can probably make up that last 20% without really putting them in jeopardy of running out too soon, which is what people worry about, right? That's what I think the most common worry that comes in the door when I'm talking to people is whether they say it this way or not, this is what it means. I'm worried about outliving my money, right? You're not going to outlive your pension. You're not going to outlive Social Security. We'll talk about Social Security. I don't believe Social Security is going anywhere anytime soon. So, but we'll talk about that. There are, obviously that's a government initiative, so they could change rules if they really wanted to. I don't think they will, but they could. But your pension is not going anywhere. Your Social Security is not going anywhere. But your retirement account, your deferred comp, your 401k, your 403b, well, that could get used up if we're not careful, right? And that's the point of this 80% rule is how do we use that asset so that you do get to enjoy it? You do get to use the money you saved all these years without putting you in jeopardy of it running out 10, 20, even 30 years from now. Again, when we do planning, one of the things I like to tell people is I've seen, if you're a planner yourself, great. That's a great thing to be. And if you're not, that's okay, by the way. But I've seen a lot of people walk in with great 1 year plans, 3 year plans. I've seen a few good 5 year plans, and pretty rarely does somebody go out 10 years with this stuff. But I've never seen anybody do a good 20 or 30-year plan in terms of, well, here's what my assets are going to be 20 years from now, and here's how the income is going to go. And I've built in inflation, and I've built in the cost of living adjustments to Social Security, blah, 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 all the little technical details that I look at every day. I've never seen anybody run out that far. And that's what the real worry is, right? We're not worried that we're going to run out of money next year. Most of us aren't. We've got the money to cover a year. We're worried about 20, 30 years from now when we're even more advanced in age. And oh my gosh, am I going to be living off of just my Social Security check or my pension if I have one? And is that going to get me anywhere close to what things are going to cost 20 or 30 years from now? I've never seen anybody walk in and be able to just answer that on day one of retirement. That's what I can answer for you. That's what we do. We help you make sure that you're going to have enough money 20 to 30 years from now. So if your pension and your Social Security are getting you most of the way there, for some of you, that may get you to 100%. I mean, I know people who have retired and their pension plus their Social Security is more than what their salary was. And if you've got that, well, it's like, well, hey, I'm made in the shade then, right? And I'll say, well, for now you are, but inflation's going to catch up with you at some point. And so we still need to have a plan for your assets too, is what I would add on to that. But no doubt, that's a great spot to be. Um, so let's talk about Social Security a little bit. And we do an entire event on Social Security every year. If you ever want to go back and watch one of our past events, you can go to our YouTube channel, by the way. This webinar will be up there probably within the next week or so. It takes a little while to get through the pipeline, but just Google Stein Financial Group YouTube. And I think Aaron will put it in the chat here as well, so that you can look it up. But we've got all of our past events there. So if you ever, ooh, I did have some Social Security questions. First of all, just call us. It's better to get one-on-one advice anyway. But secondly, if you're like, well, I'm just interested, or I really think my friend or my, my brother or my son or my daughter should be able to see this, just send them the link to the YouTube video. That's great. That's why we do it. So don't ever hesitate to go on there and look. But let's talk about Social Security. You can take Social Security as early as age 62 and as late as age 70. Now, one quick caveat, this is a rare case, but it does happen. If you are or no, I'm actually thinking of something else. I'm thinking of a deferred comp thing for a slide down the road. There really is no reason to wait until after age 70 to take Social Security. Okay? You can do it, but you might as well take it at age 70 because between age 62 and age 70, the amount of your benefit, even if you're not working anymore, even if you retired at 60, the amount that you will get for your benefit goes up every year. It goes up between 62 and your full retirement age, which is the second call or row here. Between those years, it goes up by about 75%, actually. So that's a big increase. And that happens whether you are working or not. So even if you retire at 60, that's still true. Secondly, from your full retirement age until age 70, it goes up by another 8% per year. So you get a big increase in your Social Security check just by waiting, even waiting just a couple years versus taking it right away at 62. Um, I don't know when the right time for you to take Social Security is. That's the obvious question, right? Well, when should I take it, Anthony? Tell me. One of the reasons I don't know exactly is because I don't know how long you're going to live. And one of the things that we take into account when we look at Social Security and we're doing a plan, let's say, is okay, if you waited until you were 66 or 67, or maybe all the way till 70, how long do you have to live until you net out more money than if you had taken it right away at 62? By the way, the quick rule of thumb on that is if you wait all the way until 70, you usually need to make it to about 80 years old. And if you make it to 80, you'll have netted out more money than if you had started Social Security all the way back at 62. Again, different for everybody, depends on your amounts. That's just a quick and easy way to look at it. But that's a consideration. Also, maybe the biggest consideration is where is your money going to come from? So if you want to retire at 62 and you're like, I think I can, but I need the Social Security money to help pay my way here, well, maybe it does make sense for you to take it at 62. So talking at you like this, obviously, I don't know exactly for you individually unless we sit down and look at your numbers, what the right age is, but we can really help you pinpoint it. And what I will say is, where do people make the mistakes for Social Security? The common mistake is taking it too early. Okay. And I'm not saying that's wrong for everybody. For a lot of people, it's exactly the right thing to do. But I think more people lean in that direction because, well, I'm retired, I should start getting my Social Security, right? And sometimes, but not necessarily. Maybe it makes sense to wait for a few years, even after you retire, to turn that Social Security on because of the increase in benefits. There's also a rule about if you wanted to pick up a part-time job while you're on Social Security and you're younger than this full retirement age, this middle row here, well, then you don't get penalized, but your Social Security gets reduced if you're earning money over a certain threshold while you're under 66 or 67. So if your plan is, hey, I'm going to retire from my career, but I might pick up a part-time job, just something to do to fill my time, well, then that maybe is even an extra incentive not to take Social Security early. So again, what's right for you is going to be specific to you. But you're going to take Social Security somewhere between 62 and 70. The longer you wait, the bigger the monthly number is. And then maybe this is a good place to interject before I get to that spousal benefits line about the future of Social Security. And I won't really, we could go for a long time on this. In fact, the event we did this year on Social Security goes into that. So about kind of why we think it's going to be around, and I'm not planning on it being cut. The simplest way I can put it, and this is how I describe it to people, is it would be the political fallout from a major or even a minor cut to Social Security for those who are either one, receiving it right now, or two, I think frankly within 10 to 20 years of receiving it, would be massive. the political fallout would be massive. And if there's one thing I trust politicians to do, it's to think in their own self-interest. And so I just don't see a major or even a minor for those people who are around the age of Social Security already cut happening. I just don't see it. Now, I do think there will be changes at some point, but they will more than likely be for much younger people or perhaps on the front end when they're collecting the taxes in, right? They don't have to cut benefits if they just increase the taxes potentially. So I think there are solutions to the issue of where are we going to get the money for Social Security from that don't involve cutting benefits. And frankly, I think the last thing they would want to do is cut benefits like that because of the fallout that would happen. So again, there's no guarantee of that. Congress is in control here, but I'm very skeptical that there are going to be major cuts to Social Security. Lastly, and this is something that's not as well known as it should be, if you are married, you are eligible for a spousal benefit on Social Security, meaning whatever your spouse's Social Security is, you are entitled to half of that number. So the simple math there is if your spouse's Social Security is more than double your own, let's say you didn't do as much work or you earned less money over time and their Social Security benefit is much higher, then you would be better off taking the spousal benefit, half of your spouse's. This is actually also true for ex-spouses, as long as, there's a couple caveats, as long as you were married for 10 years and you're not remarried. Okay. So if your ex-spouse is Social Security is more than double yours, you can take a benefit on theirs. And everybody immediately asks, well, do they know that I'm doing that? Am I reducing their benefit somehow? No, to both of those questions. One, they have no idea that you're doing it. They don't have to give you permission or something like that. And two, it does not reduce their benefit. So they will literally not know. You need to do what's best for you. And too many people overlook that part where they're like, oh, well, one of us, I know for my wife, we have two young girls right now, a 2.5-year-old and a 7-month-old. So it's fun at our house right now. But my wife is takes care of the girls right now. She's not working right now. She was a teacher previously. So, depending on how long that goes, and I think she'll probably go back to work at some point, but she's doing a great job as a mom right now. She's not contributing to Social Security right now, right? And I still am because I'm still working. So potentially, depending on what our future looks like here, her Social Security is going to be less than mine. Well, if mine is more than double again, she'll just take the spousal benefit and we'll net out more money from that. So that's kind of how that works. Um, Claiming strategies. I kind of alluded to that a little bit. Depends when you take it, makes a big difference for your retirement plan because the amount is different, the timing is different, the obvious things, but that's something we definitely need to factor in. And don't just assume. Again, the mistake that I see made is just assuming without even checking that the day you retire is the day you should go on Social Security. For a lot of people, it is. So I'm not saying you'd be wrong all the time. But for some people, actually, it makes a lot of sense to wait after you retire, at least for a little bit, not like a decade necessarily. Delaying until age 70 can significantly increase your payments. And then Social Security is taxable. Okay. Let me say that again. Social Security is taxable as income tax. Now, even in Minnesota is taxable at the state level, although much less taxable. They have kind of a different system. A lot of people in Minnesota don't end up paying tax on their Social Security, but some do. A lot of states around the country have completely eliminated that. Like Wisconsin has zero tax on Social Security. So, and Minnesota has talked about doing that as well. Oh, we don't need to get into the tax policy right now, but know that it's taxable. Don't forget to withhold taxes from it. They should help you when you're getting set up with it, get that done. But remember, in Minnesota, you might owe some taxes too. So we need to keep that in mind as we're collecting. And just so you know, excuse me, not in Minnesota, but federally, for most of you, there are brackets to this, but most people fall into the middle bracket. 85 cents on every dollar from Social Security is taxable. Okay, let me say that again. Not 85% tax, but only 85 cents on every dollar is taxable. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Like, if you're me and you look at this stuff all the time, like, ooh, a light bulb goes off here. So your deferred comp is 100% taxable. Every dollar is taxed every 100 cents on the dollar is taxable, right? Same thing with your para pension. 100 cents on the dollar is taxable. So if only 85 cents on the dollar is taxable for Social Security, maybe it makes sense to let that Social Security get a little bigger and be a bigger piece of your pie of your paycheck every month because it's less taxable. That's another little subtle point as to why it might make sense to wait on Social Security. So we can go if you have questions on Social Security, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A. I can get back to it at the end, but that was kind of the section on that. So let me transition to if you're a public employee, and I'll go through this a little bit quickly because I know not everybody on here is a public employee, and I don't want to go too far, but you've got benefits. And even if you're not a public employee, you've got some benefits, right? If you're a public employee, did you know that if you retire before 65, you are eligible to stay on your plan? I should say if you're a local or county employee, and I'll have to double check if the state allows that now too. They might, but you can stay on the healthcare plan that you're getting through work till 65, till Medicare. That's a nice benefit. Private sector employees generally don't get to do that. You're looking at the public marketplace usually if you're retiring before 65. So that is a nice benefit that I think most people now know about. I'm not finding too many people are surprised when I tell them that, but I try to get the word out, obviously. You've got your retirement accounts. And if you're a private sector employee, that's a 401k. If you're public, it's either a 403b or a 457. Same kind of deal. There's a few subtle nuances, but pre-tax when you save the money, so it's not taxed the year you earn it, and then it's taxable when you take it out. Health savings account or health care savings plans, which is more common if you're working for Hennepin County, let's say. Those are accounts that you can save into that if you use the money for healthcare expenses, even paying premiums in the future for your insurance, comes out tax free. Really powerful little savings tool. And lastly, your pension, right? And that's fairly self-explanatory. I think there's a slide coming up about pensions in a second. Yeah, so I'll get to a little bit of details there. I want to talk about retirement accounts. So this is true of 457s, which are deferred comp accounts. I'll use those terms kind of interchangeably here, as well as Roth accounts. Okay, and you've seen the word Roth a couple times on the screen. This is the first time I've said it. So let me explain the difference for a second, and then what are the pros and cons of each, right? So a Roth, whether it's a Roth IRA, which is an individual account, IRA stands for individual retirement account, a Roth deferred comp or 457, a Roth 401k. Roth is the other side of the coin from your normal pre-tax account, meaning your normal retirement account, the money that goes in is pre-tax or tax deferred. It comes out of your paycheck, goes into the account. You don't have to pay tax on that money until you take it out eventually, right? Roth is the other way. You pay tax if you contribute the money to Roth in the year. You don't get any tax breaks the year you contribute it. However, from that moment on, those dollars grow tax free. So I invest $1,000 today. I've paid tax on that. So really, I earned about 1,300, let's say, and then it was down to 1,000 after taxes. But from there, that $1,000 grows tax free forever. It can stay in that account for as long as you want it to, and it'll continue to rack up tax free growth. And when you take it out, no taxes are due. Now, when I say that, everybody's like, oh, that sounds like a great deal. And it is a good deal. And they're like, well, I should be saving into the Roth then. And I say, okay, let's pause for 1 second. Roth is a great thing to save into, but the thing you should think about, and again, this goes back to I'm trying to give you the tools to think about this stuff in the way I do. What you're really doing when you decide between a 457 401k IRA or a Roth is you're deciding when you want to pay taxes. All right, let me say that again. You're deciding when you want to pay taxes. Yes, that Roth is going to grow tax free, so that's a little bonus there. But you're either going to pay taxes now on a Roth when you contribute it, or later on a regular deferred comp or 401k when you take it out. Consider then where does your income fall right now? If you are about to retire, let's say, you are probably in your prime earning years, right? Your salary is probably as high as it's ever been, potentially. Obviously, everybody's a little different, but it's on the higher end of certainly like compared to the first job you had 30 years ago, right? So, would I rather still save things to the pre-tax, the tax deferred, because I'm in the highest bracket I'm ever going to be in right now? Right? That is something that's overlooked when I just tell you what the difference between Roth and IRA is. And for a lot of people, I still tell them, no, I would rather keep us in a Roth, or excuse me, I'd rather save to the pre-tax than the Roth right now. Okay? Like it's not it's not always like super cut and dry. Sometimes I say, well, if you can do both, let's try to do some of both. I think that's a great idea. But don't overlook the fact that if you're already in a high tax bracket, maybe you do want the tax break right now and you want that compounding to happen on money that hasn't been taxed yet. So there are pros and cons to both options there. By the way, the one little tricky thing about this decision that makes it kind of an impossible question to know 100% is not only does your income change over your life, but tax brackets can change, right? So if taxes are going to go up in the future, maybe we do want to pay taxes right now. So again, it can be a really tricky thing. This is a totally an individual conversation. Again, this is something you and I should be talking about one on one to say, well, let me see the full picture here because I can't give you a quick and dirty. Well, if you make over this much, do a Roth, and if you make over under this much, do a regular, right? There's no um, one size fits all rule there, as you'll find there really isn't for many of these things. That's kind of why we say just call us and we'll talk about it. But one of the things that I try to communicate to people is this right over my shoulder here, this last little blurb. I've said this to people years and years now. When you retire and we start taking money out of these accounts, whenever that happens, some people don't need to touch them for a long time. Some people do. Um, you may, and I think this is the majority opinion, you may feel a tightness in your chest, a little cold sweat breaking out when you take out that first dollar from your savings account, from your retirement account. And you'll think in your head, whether you say it out loud or not, I'm doing something wrong right now. I can feel it. You know, it's that sinking feeling of this has got to be a mistake. I'm not supposed to take money out from this. I'm supposed to save. I'm supposed to be diligent about it. I can't take money out. That's bad. And what I try to tell people is one, it'll take you a while to adjust. But the whole point of talking to somebody like me or doing a retirement plan individually is so that you can use that money and do it responsibly and do it in a way that's not going to harm you in the long term or put you at risk of running out of money. And it's gonna feel weird. Even if we've done the whole shebang, we've looked at every possible outcome, and I say, hey, I feel really great about this. You are gonna be just fine. You'll still potentially feel bad about it. And that's normal, and you will get over it because I've seen it time and time again. People feel more comfortable the more time that goes. We're an adaptable people, but you are flipping the switch from being a saver to a spender. And there is going to be some whiplash as you change directions there. That's okay. It's okay to feel a little queasy about it. That's what somebody like me can help you navigate so that you can say, well, Anthony keeps telling me that this is working, so I guess it's still working. And then eventually you'll be like, oh, yeah, well, what was I even worried about? This is going great. But I've seen that transition so many times that I'm just like, I try to prepare people in advance. It's going to feel a little weird. That's okay. That's normal. You will get over it. You will move past it. I've seen it time and time again. Okay. So, talking about para specifically a little bit, the one thing that I haven't said about para that I do want to point out is you are able to set beneficiaries on your para pension, okay? And that means if you were to die, who will continue to receive checks, if anyone, after you're gone. And you can even set the percentage you want them to receive. So, when you sign up for your para, or even when they send you the little quote that you can excuse me, pull offline or that you'll get in the mail. It will have five options there: 0%, 25%, 50%, 75, 100%. That percentage refers to the percentage of your check, of your pension benefit, that you want your beneficiary to receive. So the simplest two are 0% means it stops when you're gone, right? Nobody gets anything after you're gone, 0%. 100% means they get the same check you were getting during your life. And to compensate for that, you get a slightly lower check in the beginning, right? 0%, if you elect that, you get the biggest possible check because they know they only have to pay it for your life. If you do 100%, you get a smaller check because they know they're going to pay it out potentially for two lives, not two full lives, but if it's usually if it's a spouse. If it is someone, and a lot of people don't know this, you can designate a beneficiary that is not your spouse. But if that person, and even if they are a spouse, and they're more than 10 years younger than you, there is a separate formula, and your check might be reduced more upfront to compensate. Obviously, if your beneficiary is somebody who's going to live multiple decades longer than you because they're already multiple decades younger than you, they need to adjust what they're willing to pay you because they're going to be paying for a long time, right? So know that going in, but I can help you crunch all those numbers. In general, I do like taking a higher percentage versus a lower one, taking a lower upfront check, but one that is guaranteed, especially if the spouse is the beneficiary for the entire household's lifetime. That really makes planning a lot easier because it takes out that variable of, well, what happens if I walk out of our meeting, Anthony, and get hit by a bus, and then, that sort of thing. It takes a lot of those questions off the table. But what's right for any one person individually is going to be specific to you, as all of these are. All right, I want to talk about risks here for a minute. And I've got a list of different types of risks. If you get licensed like I have for financial advice or for talking about investments, there's a test you have to take where it goes into all these risks. These are all, your textbook vocabulary terms and all that. But I'm going to try to boil it down as simply as I possibly can. All right. And there's going to be, I'm not just going to read the text on the screen. You can certainly, all the text is great. You can copy it down. Again, this will be recorded, so you can even go back and reference it later. But let me just tell you what this means in plain English. Market risk. What if the stock market tanks? Okay. That's what market risk is. What if the stock market tanks, especially right after you retire? Although that gets into a slightly different risk. I'll get to that in a second. Um, if your account is too aggressive while you're retired, you could be getting big ups and downs, and that could make kind of a wild ride in retirement where you're seeing your balance really zigzag. Generally, we want to smooth out your ride when you retire and get a little less aggressive, maybe, than you were, unless you're already not aggressive, and then maybe it's keeping it the same. Um, Longevity risk. Longevity risk is the risk of outliving your money. Okay. One of the ways I put it is um, life insurance, right? If any of you have life insurance is essentially insurance for dying too soon, right? If I die too soon and I leave financial burdens, like I have life insurance that covers the mortgage on our house, that would help my wife put the girls through school or whatever she wants to do with the money, that sort of thing. That's what life insurance is for. Your investments, your para, your Social Security are essentially insurance, not literally insurance, but essentially they're insurance for if you live too long, quote unquote. And, maybe that's a problem we'd all like to have, or maybe not, but that's what we need to think about. How do we set things up so that you can't outlive your assets and you can live the life you want to live while you're aging? Right? That's another key piece. It's easy to not live out your assets. Just cut your spending way down and live off of, canned beans every meal. But that's not the retirement that I hope you're envisioning for yourself. Okay. Health risk. All right. I'm not going to just go through all of Medicare. By the way, we have a Medicare event coming up, I believe next month, right, Aaron? Because open enrollment is around the corner. And it will dive into what Medicare is, how it works, what the pitfalls are, what the things you should be thinking about. But very briefly, it is September 23rd at 12 p.m. And if you At the very end of this, I'm going to throw a little poll up on the screen so you can even pre-register or ask us to pre-register you for it. So let us know. But Medicare starts at 65. If you're still working, you don't have to take Medicare at 65. I'm not going to get into the details because that would be I'd be 10 minutes just on that topic, and I've got more to get through here. But that is a key um, decision that if you're still working at 65, you don't have to enroll in Medicare as long as you're covered by a workplace plan already. If you don't have health insurance, then you do. But Medicare has costs associated to it. It's not, some people will tell you Part A is free, quote unquote. We know that's not true. It's not free. It's just you've already paid for it out of your payroll taxes. But Part B has a cost that comes out of usually your Social Security check, if you're already taking Social Security. And then Part C, Medicare Advantage, that's the extra plan, essentially. I'm oversimplifying here, but that is a plan that you build on top of Medicare that is more fit to what you want out of your insurance. There is a plan, for example, that mirrors Hennepin County's healthcare plan. There's a Medicare Advantage plan which is designed to work like the county's plan for employees. And a lot of people just transition right to that because it's like, okay, well, I know everything's in my network and I know it's going to cover all the same things. I'm used to having this. So this is a very brief little bit on Medicare, but it's not just going to get, oh, I just sign up for it like Social Security and then my insurance card comes in the mail. No, you've got to make some decisions. You've got to choose what coverage you want for an Advantage plan, and it does cost something, although it's not usually prohibitive in terms of expenses. Um, so, well, questions to think about. Again, this is related to that health risk. What happens if you die too soon? That's kind of the life insurance question. And what about nursing home stays, right? Long-term care, they call it. That can be a big financial burden. And long-term care insurance has what I call the trifecta of not bad insurance. It's not that the insurance is bad, but undesirable characteristics about insurance. It's hard to get, it's expensive, and you might not end up even using it. And of course, that last one's true of all insurance. And you kind of hope you don't end up using it. But the fact that it's expensive and hard to get really makes it, well, obviously it's hard to get, but it makes it a tough conversation for people. I encourage everybody to think or look at getting it. I don't necessarily encourage everyone to get it. Okay. And the difference between those two statements is for long-term care insurance, it is valid to say, well, if I need to go into a nursing home or if I need home health care, I'm going to be using my assets for that. I'm going to be using my pension, my Social Security to cover that expense. And yeah, it might go over kind of the levies there or go over the maximums that I have saved up. But at that point, there is state coverage that can help me. That is a valid plan. Okay. But we need to talk about it in advance to see if that is the right plan, would be my case that I'll make. So that was a very brief again on long-term care. By the way, we've done an entire long-term care event this year that you can find on our YouTube channel. So we really do dig into these topics even more granularly on or certainly one-on-one, but also other events that we do. This is kind of the in a box version. Okay, economic risk, inflation. Well, what if things get more expensive quicker than we anticipate? How do we know? Yeah, you might have enough money for today's prices to live the rest of your life, but 20 years from now, what's a dollar going to be able to buy, right? What can a dollar buy today would be a fair question. But what could a dollar buy 20, 30, 40 years ago versus what it could buy today, right? Well, think 20, 30 years into the future, it's going to be even less than that. So we have to take that into account. Interest rates. It is not viable at this time to, when you retire, park your money in a CD and live off the interest for the rest of your life. Unless you've already got so much money that you could afford to basically make zero interest and just live off of it. Back in the 80s, or even some part way into the 90s, that was a viable strategy. You could make double digits return at the bank, potentially. That's just not the world we live in anymore. So we have to think about in a lower, although interest rates are higher now than they were for the last decade, basically, a lower interest rate environment, how are we going to earn enough money to keep the lights on, to keep the wheels turning here. That's one thing we specialize in is helping with that. Tax changes, right? I already told you everything that you're going to get in retirement. I shouldn't say everything because I don't. For some of you, you may have other assets, but deferred comp, pension, Social Security, all taxable. Okay. How do we navigate that? How do we make sure that you're not just getting slammed with a huge tax bill every year if you don't have to be? And again, there's no way to get out of the taxes on those things. They are what they are. But could we convert some of your pre-tax money to Roth money after you retire, after you drop into a lower tax bracket? That's a strategy we employ with a lot of people, and it saves a ton of money sometimes on taxes. I mean, up to if the difference is, well, I could pay 12% in taxes or 22% in taxes, if we could pay 12 instead of 22, we're saving 10% on every dollar. That's huge. So those are strategies we look at. I won't go into super depth. Certainly, if you have questions about it, let me know. And by the way, any questions that come up, you can use the chat function in this meeting, or, and sometimes this is better, just shoot us an email. You've got our email because you were invited to this, but also I'll have all our contact information up at the end here as well. And then also on this page, sequence of returns risk, which is essentially what if the market tanks the day I put in my notice that I'm going to retire, right? What if I picked the absolute worst timing? I retire in February of 2020 right before the pandemic, and oh my gosh, all of a sudden the market's down 30%. What does that mean long term? Well, I'll tell you that obviously we don't know for certain when the next time the market drop is going to be. Nobody knows that. But any good plan worth its salt will build in a high tolerance for that sort of thing. We do that. We call it bad timing. So we look at not only does this plan for you have to work in a long-term view, it has to work in the long-term view if the first few years you lose money on your investments. That's a safety feature built in, I guess you could call it. And that is crucial because that's what sequence of returns means. What if the sequence is bad for you? So our last topic here, and again, estate planning is worth its own hour. We've done an estate planning webinar earlier this year. So again, check out our YouTube channel for that. But just hit the high notes of it, because again, it can get very complicated very quickly. Um, why does it matter? I already told you I don't like that term estate planning because I think it makes you think of an estate or somebody who's got more money than they know what to do with, and they're doing all sorts of fancy trusts or what have you. That's not what I want you to think about. Estate planning is about what you want to happen, A, when you're no longer here, and B, how do we set that up so that it works smoothly while you are still here? That's what it is. If you fail the plan, you plan to fail, right? So I want to talk briefly because these are some terms that I think everybody should know. Will versus trust. A will is something, and by the way, not everybody even needs a will. If you need a referral to an attorney who can help you with that, we can give you some names of people we really like. I've worked with the attorney that we refer people to personally, and he'll be the first to tell you because I've been in meetings with him with people where he's like, I don't think you guys need a will. He'll tell you that if he doesn't think you need one. Now, a lot of people do, and a lot of people, even if you're like, well, you're saying I don't need it, but I kind of just want it. I want my ducks in a row. Great. A will decides and is written down who inherits the assets that do not have beneficiaries on them. Let me say that again. A will determine where the money that you have, the assets that you have that do not have beneficiaries on them, where it will go, right? So if you have deferred comp or a 401k, you probably have beneficiaries on it. By the way, if you don't, we should look at that. But with beneficiaries, those named people are written into the contract of your investment account, and it supersedes a will. So even if in your will you say, "Hey, I want everything to go to my two kids," but then you forgot to change your beneficiary on your deferred comp from your ex-spouse, that's who's getting the money. The ex-spouse is not what's in your will. So hopefully we don't make that mistake. Again, good thing to review your beneficiaries to make sure if that's a situation that could apply to you that that doesn't happen. But beneficiaries, you don't need a will to pass money through the beneficiary. But again, not all accounts can have beneficiaries on them. Most can, not all can. By the way, did you know you can put beneficiaries on your bank account and your house? A lot of people don't know that. You go to the bank on your bank accounts and you say you want them to be payable on death, POD. They'll give you a form to set that up, and then you've got beneficiaries on your bank accounts. Your house, similar, you can get what's called a transfer on death deed to the house. Usually, you've got to go through your local county to get the deed kind of transferred into that, but then it's just written right on the deed. This is who gets the deed to the house when I'm no longer here. And you don't even have to worry about the will specifying that. You could do it with a will too. Um, a trust, on the other hand, and there are many types of trusts. When you hear the word trust, this is my classic line about trust. I want you to hear the word control. Okay? Trusts allow you to have more control over not just who gets the assets that the trust inherits, but how and when and why they get them. Okay? And I would say I said not everybody needs a will. Even fewer people need a trust. Okay. The big times when I would look at someone and say, you need a trust are one, when there's an asset that you want to pass down or have your next generation benefit from, but you don't necessarily want to give them free reign over what to do with it. Like a family cabin that your grandfather built with his bare hands, for example. Hey, I want that cabin to be in the family. I don't want them to just sell it right after we die and pass it on. I want it to stay for the grandkids someday or whatever. Okay, then the trust could own it and it would have stipulations about what they could or couldn't do with it, right? Also, if there are kids or beneficiaries who have issues with money, and maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for them to inherit a chunk of change all at once. That might not set them up for success, let's say. A trust could meter out how they receive it, and they might even have to provide a reason. Again, trust can get very complicated, but much in my experience, fewer people need a trust than need a will. A will just says who gets the money, and it can control a little bit about the timing and stuff like that. There are some provisions there, but a trust gives you ultimate control over that stuff. Um, Next, and you can read the descriptions, power of attorney versus medical power of attorney. A lot of people don't know this, okay? And you also need to know the word durable when it comes to power of attorney. Okay. So if you're going online to like a site where you can just download the power of attorney form in Minnesota, you can just Google Minnesota power of attorney form, and the state provides like a short form version that you can just fill out, and you need to have it notarized for you. But you don't need an attorney to draft this for you. There's a sample form for the state of Minnesota, at least, and I would assume a lot of states are similar that way. A power of attorney, regular power of attorney, has the ability to act on your behalf in legal and financial matters only. Only. So designating a regular power of attorney does not make them a medical power of attorney unless you're doing both at the same time, which a lot of people do. But a medical power of attorney designates someone to make decisions if you become incapacitated. A lot of people think those are the same thing. Well, a power of attorney could do, legal and financial stuff, but they could also tell the doc what to do when I'm in a coma, let's say. No, two separate things. Now, often you can have the same person be both. So, you can still accomplish it, but know that going in. And then that word durable, okay? Durable means that it stays in effect if you are incapacitated, right? Which means a regular power of attorney does not stay in effect if you are incapacitated, which is what a lot of people think they're doing power of attorney for, right? You say, well, yeah, if I go into a coma someday, I want somebody to be able to pay my bills and manage my finances for me while I'm recovering, blah, 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 right? I'm just covering my bases. But if it's not a durable power of attorney, their power goes away when you become incapacitated. So make sure it's durable when you're doing it. It's durable to go through that health event. That's what most people want. And then I hope it's impressed upon you that be careful who you're making your power of attorney. Not because somebody's going to take advantage of you necessarily or whatever, but you are granting them a lot of power. A person we work with, an accountant we work with, actually, I was talking after a meeting I had with him, and he said, "Yeah, my mom just granted me power of attorney. You know, she's getting a little older, and he's an accountant, so pretty responsible with money. Good idea." And he said, jokingly, "Mom, do you know what you just did?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, if something happens to me, you can take care of the bills. You can make sure, you've got the power to act as me." And he's like, "Well, yeah, that's true. But I could put your house up for sale. I could put your house up for sale today if I wanted to as a power of attorney." And of course, he was joking. He's playing around with his mom a little bit. And she was like, "You could?" And she had no idea. And that is true. As a power of attorney, unless your powers are limited, you have full control over the other person's financial and legal matters, even today while they're still able to do things themselves. So again, I just say that to say, obviously pick a good person. And you don't have to make them power of attorney today. You can just get it ready for, well, down the road, we'll do it. Okay. But start thinking about that stuff. Lastly, and briefly, healthcare directive. That's just you writing down what you want to happen rather than relying on a person to make medical decisions for you. Okay. And obviously, the more specific your desires are, the more important getting one of those done is. Even if you just say, well, no, I'll just rely on a person, obviously pick a person who's going to want what's best for you. Hopefully, that goes without saying. So, your estate plan, every will needs an executor. That's a person who will execute the will. That's why the word executor comes from. Pick someone who's going to do a good job, not necessarily just the person who's closest to you. Hopefully that's obvious, but again, I like to reiterate it because you want someone who's going to execute your document, not who's going to go and say, "Well, I know what they really meant when they wrote that," right? That's where it gets messy. Get somebody who's going to stick to what's on the will, the piece of paper. Name beneficiaries. If you haven't done this for any of your accounts, we should look at doing it. It saves those assets from having to go through probate, which is how a will distributes assets after a person's gone. So the more assets that we can circumvent the will with by naming beneficiaries, the less stuff has to go through probate. Probate is not the horror story that you might be familiar with. There are horror stories with probate, but generally it works a little smoothly, especially in Minnesota. But still, why not avoid it if it's just as simple as signing a piece of paper that says, "Yep, I want the kids to get this." And communicate your plan. Okay? Here's what I mean by that. You don't have to tell somebody where every account is and how much money is in it and what you want to happen with it ahead of time, right? That's what a will is for. You've written it down. That's what beneficiaries are for. But tell somebody the general idea at least. "Hey, just want you to know this stuff's all set up. It's in a folder in my office marked, break in case of emergency," right? And everything's laid out in there. But again, if any of you have helped with a parent who is aging and maybe didn't have this stuff in place, you're finding this stuff like in cracks and cubbies, and they never told you about any of it. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, well, I just did all this work and this one document would have solved all of it." Tell somebody where that stuff is. Again, you can share, if you're that type of person, share everything with them. "Hey, this is where all the accounts are. This is what they're worth. This were my ideas for them." But if you want to, we're in Minnesota. People tend to be tight-lipped about money. I get it. Just tell them where they need to go and centralize that information for them. It's going to make it so much easier. Okay. And then lastly, just a brief bit on taxes. I've got 2 minutes left. I'll stick to that. Remember that your benefits in large part are taxable. Roths are not taxable when you take the money out, but you've paid taxes to get the money in. So we need to look at the timing and the scheduling of that to make sure you're actually getting a good deal by doing that. And long term, having multiple different kinds of assets. And I don't just mean like stocks and bonds and CDs, I mean taxability. Having pre tax deferred comp, having Roth, having an investment account that is neither pre-tax or Roth, but is just what I would call a non-tax qualified investment account that pays different types of taxes. That gives somebody like me who's helping you take money out in a responsible way decide how you can minimize your taxes when you call up and say, "Hey Anthony, we're putting a deck on the back. It's going to be well, decks are ridiculously expensive. It's going to be 30 to 40 grand is probably what it would cost to do a new deck. But we need the money for it. Where should we take it from?" Or you don't even have to ask that second question. That's what I start thinking about. You just say, "Hey, we need that money." And then I'll look at it and I'll say, "Okay, well, actually, given where your income's at, I think we take this much from your deferred comp, this much from your non-IRA or non-deferred comp assets, and then maybe like a smidge from your Roth or something." Or it could be, "No, we definitely take it all from this one." But I can help minimize the taxes when you actually need the money or want the money to live on. And that's a hugely underrated piece of all this. Um, I won't go into this because we're at time, but there are a lot of different gifting strategies and ways that we can try to reduce or minimize your taxes going forward based on giving. So key takeaways, and then I'll be done. And I do have time for questions, by the way. Let's maximize your income. That's obvious, but how do we do that? How do we mash your puzzle pieces together there? Pay attention to taxes. You'll get surprised in that first year if you don't pay attention, so it's better to pay attention up front. Plan for the unexpected, the risks that I talked about. What happens if the market tanks? Are you going to be okay? Can you answer that question right now? I would say a lot of you, if you haven't worked with us or anybody, you probably can't totally answer that question right now. That's what we can help with. And don't forget to spend. Don't forget to actually have fun and live the life you want to live. That's why we're doing all this planning, so you can just live your life and not have to think about all these little details. We think about them for you. So, contact info is up on the screen. That connect email is our general email that we'll all see. But certainly you can Google us and find our website, or our website's right there actually, and get to our YouTube page, find all of our individual emails. Thank you all. If you need to hop off, I know I'm a couple minutes over, my apologies. Please do. Please let us know if any questions come up, and I will stick around here to see if any questions trickle in through the chat here. But thank you for being here. Hopefully you picked up a couple things that are worthwhile, and if you're coming next month, we'll see you for the Medicare event.